Hillstead Museum in Farmington, Connecticut is a place where art and nature flourish together, just as the family that designed this estate intended. Hillstead is a colonial revival house built at the turn of the 20th century and maintained today just as it was when the family that built it lived here. Hillstead is their outstanding art collection. Hillstead is 150 acres of fields, trails, and scenic views. Hillstead is May Market and other seasonal events for the whole family. Hillstead is also a beautiful sunken garden, the site of the annual Sunken Garden Poetry Festival. This program and the ones that follow are an invitation to you to attend this summer's series of poetry and music events.
If you're one of those people who encountered poetry back in high school and found it dull or obscure, you should try visiting Hillstead Museum on a summer evening and experience poetry in a whole new way. Every other week in the summer, hundreds of people converge at this beautiful estate to hear some of the best poets in the country read poetry that is relevant and accessible. People love the informality and outdoor setting of this festival. You can bring lawn chairs or blankets, pack a picnic, or buy dinner and wine from the vendors here. There's an hour of live music, anything from jazz to folk to classical, and then you can hear some of America's foremost poets. Hillstead has hosted the Sunken Garden Poetry Festival for over 20 years. One of the country's leading poetry events, the festival introduces audiences to U.S. Poets Laureate like Richard Wilbur and Natasha Trethewey, Pulitzer Prize winners, and other major American poets in the intimate and formal setting of the historic garden. The festival's ongoing popularity is evidence that poetry still holds an important place in American culture and that poetry has a unique power to remind us of our common humanity. We hope you will join us in the summer of 2014 as we welcome 5 outstanding poets, including Kevin Young, Frank Bedard, Alicia Ostreicher, Jeffrey Harrison, and Amy Nezukumatatil.
It's thrilling to be back here. It's been 18 years since my first time at Sunken Garden, and it is the best poetry audience in the United States. It really is. It's amazing. I'm going to read new poems tonight from a book that's almost finished. And some of them haven't been read before aloud, so I'm trying them out. I thought you deserved to hear something no one else has heard. Early life. I was born in Le Dutoit du Lac-Errier, 5 years after the end of the war. My father's naval uniform hung among the coats, and his white cap, flung into the sea at war's end, still then floated on the waves there. My father built a house for us, working in the dark after his factory shift. One night, a long-buried woman appeared, all fog and bones, passing through a wall he'd yet to finish. Later, we hung a mirror on this wall, and from time to time, she stood behind it, looking out. Ours was among the post-war houses built on a burial ground of the Potawatomi. Beneath the 18th century house nearby, there was a cellar where escaping slaves once were hidden. An underground rail carried them through the tunnel that could still be heard beneath the fields, but only by children who listened through the grass for the whistle. Apricots and mulberries, squash and pole beans grew under my father's hands. Tubers, cukes, berry canes, corn silk, and lettuces opening in watery light. In the kitchen, carrot stalks and wild onion were put into ringing jars in canning season. Pillows of bread dough rose in the bowls, and a soup boiled the windows blind. Below them, daffodils honked from blue snow in the not yet spring. flocks of laundry pinned to the sky snapped forth. Behind us, the outbuildings smelled of a sewer, and a hillock of liquor bottles caught the sun. The shacks of the poor were made of paper. We were not the poor, as our father built the house of bricks. Our mother owned a sewing machine, and we were given oranges at Christmas. You know, many of you know that I had a Czechoslovak grandmother, my father's mother, that she lived with us when we were little, that she was a big woman who wore babushkas and wire-rimmed glasses and those black tie shoes, and she spoke 5 languages, Central European languages. English was her poorest language, and that she made up words in English and ways of saying things when she didn't know how to say them. She called a colander a macaroni, stop, water, go ahead. She called me piscata, which means chatterbox, or little bird that sings too much, and she would say, piscata, go get me this macaroni, stop, water, go ahead. So that's how I learned you could manipulate language if you wanted to. So my first serious poem was written about her, and it was called Burning the Tomato Worms. And after that was published, Anna died 7 years before it was published, so she never got to see it. But she kind of stands behind me late at night if I'm writing. I can feel her saying, I want to be in the book. So she gets a poem in every book. In every book, Anna appears, you know, like, where's Waldo? There's Anna. So she has a poem in this book too, and this is Anna's poem in this book. And it's called Visitation. On the nativity tree, a tiny lute, a French horn and painted egg, a crèche carved from olive wood, a trumpeting angel. The Cossack in his red tunic dances between a bird's nest and some Eiffel towers. In the iced window, it seems as if a cathedral shivers in mist, and its bells shower stones as bits of torn cloud float toward the spires. There are also boats sailing in the window, and a city resembling Dresden or Hamburg after the war. Anna is there, crocheting smoke, not speaking English anymore, as if English had put out her memory like a broom on a fire. The snows drift all the way to the roof of the house, so it is no longer possible to open the door. She tells us that on this night in her village, they would carry home a live carp wrapped in paper that had just been swimming in a barrel. The fish would silver the snow and have its life taken by a sharp axe. The potatoes that had grown eyes in the cellar would be brought up and baked with the fish, and there would be beet soup, black bread, and wine made from mulberries. Something would be given to each of them, a thing they wanted but didn't need, and then they would sleep as if in a boat at sea with the bright carp swimming through the snow of their thoughts. Then she would be off, tunneling through the drifts as only a spirit could tunnel, leaving behind a coin purse, a crystal brooch, a holy card with her own birth and death dates, so we would know that she hadn't visited us, that her satin-pillowed coffin lay still in the ground. Nevertheless, the tinsel flickered as she passed. The tiny lighthouse sent its signal to the boats, and the sheep bounded away over the fir branch tufted with wool, and in every glass bulb, there we were, children descended from her on a winter night. There are lighthouse people. You in Connecticut are very familiar with lighthouse people. They're just people who have to go see every lighthouse that is anywhere nearby. And the problem is they want to be alone with the white lighthouse, but there are always other lighthouse people there, staring and glaring at each other as if to say, when are you going to leave? But so I'm one of those people that likes lighthouses, and this one is a poem for a friend of mine who died and who was also a lighthouse person. And this lighthouse is called Hook. It's in Ireland, and nearby, across the water, is a lighthouse called Crook. So by hook or by crook might have started there. I don't know. It makes sense to me. The light keeper, a night without ships. Foghorns called into walled cloud, and you, still alive, drawn to the light, as if it were a fire kept by monks. Darkness once crusted with stars, but now death dark as you sail inward. Through wild gorse and sea wrack, through heather and torn wool you ran, pulling me by the hand so I might see this for once in my life. The spin and spin of light, the whirring of it, light in search of the lost, there since the era of fire, era of candles and hollow wick lamps, whale oil and solid wick, colza and lard, kerosene and carbide, the signal fires lighted on this perilous coast in the Tower of Hook. You say to me, stay awake. Be like the lens maker who died with his lungs full of glass. Be the yew in blossom when bees swarm. Be their amber cathedral, and even the ghosts of Cistercians will be kind to you. In a certain light, as after rain, in pearled clouds or the water beyond, seen or sensed water, sea or lake, you would stop still and gaze out for a long time. Also when fireflies opened and closed in the pines, and a star appeared, our only heaven. You taught me to live like this, that after death it would be as it was before we were born. Nothing to be afraid, nothing but happiness as unbearable as the dread from which it comes. Go toward the light always. Be without ships. This same friend didn't like to buy souvenirs. He traveled the world very lightly, and he would always go down to the ground and take a little stone or a pebble that he liked, and he would take it home and put it on a little prong on a box and label it. Pebble found beneath Eiffel Tower, July 1977. And this was just a little stone. It was nothing, but for him it was Paris. So he had a big wall of these things. So I thought it was very cool, and so I asked him if he minded if I made one of these for myself. He said, no, everybody should have their own museum. So I started to collect the stones. He said, do not take any stones from the Parthenon, the Acropolis, places like that, because you will be arrested. So, but I started doing this, only I wasn't meticulous and I wasn't organized, and so what I now have are 3 grocery bags filled with various pebbles, stones, rocks, and different things like that. And they're not labeled, and I can't tell them apart, and I don't know where they're from. They're from all over the world, but they, you know, they're just bags of rocks. So, but this is for him, the lighthouse friend, and this is for his stones. He was from Belfast, by the way. Some of you will recognize a reference to a city in this poem. It's Belfast. The Museum of Stones. These are your stones, assembled in matchbox and tin, collected from roadside, culvert and viaduct, battlefield, threshing floor, basilica, abattoir. Stones loosened by tanks in the streets, from a city whose earliest map was drawn in ink on linen. Schoolyard stones in the hand of a corpse. Pebble from Baudelaire's Oui. stone of the mind within us, carried from one silence to another. Stone of cromlech and cairn, schist and shale, hornblende, agate, marble, millstones, ruins of choirs and shipyards, chalk, marl, mudstone from temples and tombs, stone from the silvery grass near the scaffold, stone from the tunnel lined with bones. Lava of a city's entombment. Stones chipped from lighthouse, cell wall, scriptorium, paving stones from the hands of those who rose against the army. Stones where the bells had fallen, where the bridges were blown. Those that had flown through windows, weighted petitions, feldspar, rose quartz, blue schist, gneiss, and chert. Fragments of an abbey at dusk. Sandstone toe of a Buddha mortared at Bamyan. Stone from the hill of 3 crosses and a crypt. From a chimney where storks cried like human children. Stones newly fallen from stars. A stillness of stones, a heart. Altar and boundary stone, marker and vessel, first cast, load and hail. Bridge stones and others to pave and shut up with. Stone apple, stone basil, beech berry, stone brake, stone bramble, stone fern, lichen, liverwort, pippin, and root. Concretion of the body, as blind, as cold, as deaf. All earth a quarry, all life a labor. Stone-faced, stone drunk with hope that this assemblage of rubble taken together would become a shrine or holy place, an ossuary, immovable and sacred, like the stone that marked the path of the sun as it entered the human dawn. Litany in Krakow. The yes of the living, the no of the wall, the yes of the bridge, the no of the water below the bridge, the yes of wind, no of wire, the yes of bells, the no of the bolted door, the yes of air, the no of answer, the yes of swallows, the no of stone. Okay, I'm going to read a poem about the siege of Sarajevo. It's for a friend who lived through the siege. The people of Sarajevo were starved during the siege. They built a tunnel under the airport runway and smuggled things into the city. Letter to a city under siege. Turning the pages of the book you have lent me of your wounded city. Reading the braille on its walls, walking beneath ghost branches of chestnuts, past fires that turned the bullet-shattered windows bronze, flaring an instant without warming the fallen houses where you sleep without water or light. A biscuit tin of nothing between you. Or later in the cafe ruins, you discuss all night the burnt literature borrowed from a library where all books met with despair. I want to give your notes back to you, so they might be published in another language, not yours or mine, but a tongue understood by children who make bulletproof vests out of cardboard. We could then lie down in the cemetery where violets grew in your childhood, before snipers fired on the city using gravestones for cover. Friend, absent one, exile, I can tell you that your tunnel is still there. Mud-walled and hollowed of earth, through which you smuggled oranges into the city, oranges bright as winter moons by the barrow load. So let's walk further up the street to the hill where one can see the city woven in fog, roofs filled with sky, uprooted bridges, and a shop window where a shard of glass hung over the spine of a book. The library burns on page 60, as it burns in all the newspapers of the world. And the clopping of horses' hooves isn't the sound of clopping horses. This is where, through snow, a dog finds his way with, in its mouth, a human bone. Quiet are the ruins of the houses of God. All the houses. And what else? What more? No food, no light, no water. Even clocks aren't spared. This past year, I finally went to Vietnam. I was married very young to a man who had come back from Pleiku and Cu Chi, 19. He was there in 66 and 67. And I went to Vietnam to the north, to Hanoi and Hue, in the company of soldiers, veterans of the war from both sides of the conflict. So I wrote a little poem for them, small, it's called Hue. We went that evening by dragon boat down the Perfume River as far as the pagoda of the 3 golden Buddhas. Candle boats in water and flames in floating lanterns down the night lit for the lost. The soldiers are old now, decades from the battlefield, pewter-haired, steel-haired, moons caught in the plumeria branch, metal still in the rice fields. Bicycle chains no longer sing in the streets, nor is there the whir of stork swings. But on the gray stone slabs of the 10,000 graves lie chrysanthemum. We are clouds that pass and pass. What does it matter if we are not the same as clouds? We are flutes in a field waiting for wind. During the war, we were light because we severed all thoughts of time. For us, it was as if time were all at once. Now we say, greater courage is needed after the war than in its midst. I have a few little short poems at the end. One is called Morning on the Island. You know that in the West, there's a beetle that's eating the pines in the fir trees, you know, and eating whole forests of them, so they're turning brown. Morning on the island. The lights across the water are the waking city. The water shimmers with imaginary fish. Not far from here lie the bones of conifers, washed from the sea and piled by wind. Some mornings I walk upon them, bone to bone as far as the lighthouse. A strange beetle has eaten most of the trees. It may have come here on the ships playing music in the harbor, or it was always here, a winged jewel, but in the past was kept still by the cold of a winter that no longer comes. There is an owl living in the firs behind us, but he is white, meant to be mistaken for snow, burdening a bough. They say he is the only owl remaining. I hear him at night, listening for the last of the mice and asking who of no other owl. If you look at the end of something, we ate our lunch under the lindens. Figs were last. The lemons were nearly ripe, hanging like ornaments from the lemon branch. This isn't our last day, she said. Tomorrow is our last day. As proof, she offered time, singing in the olives. There was a field of poppies nearby. After the Second War, only one bridge remained. People crowd upon it. We were trying to climb to the ruins when my heart gave way. When my heart gave way in the poppy field, I had to turn back. Before turning back, I pressed a few poppies in a book. Before turning back, I also took a photograph of no one standing in the poppy field. I was myself standing. I asked my mother, thousands of miles away, to help me back to the house. If you are still reading this, I am flooded with peace. Harmalapi is a Greek word meaning a kind of sadness that is beautiful also. It begins with a word as small as the cry of Athena's owl, an ache in the cage of breath, as when we say, can hardly breathe. In sleep, we see our name on a stone, for instance, or while walking in the rain among graves, we feel watched. Others are still coming into our lives. They come, they go out. Some speak quietly beside us on the bench near where koi swim. At night, there is a light sound of wings brushing the walls. Not now is what it sounds like, or 2 words in a language. But they are the same passerines as live in the stone eaves, as forage in the air toward night. To see them, one must not be looking. And the last poem is Sanctuary. Light pealed, bell-like through the canopy, long ago, or seems so. Then the ghost of a deer, and crows flapping through smoke. I don't remember this. She made a poultice for me of herbs and mud to suck the poison from the boil, and then she went into a mahogany coffin, as there were then. Mornings horses cantered through ground fog, having broken loose. So I would go out for them, bridles in hand, with no one awake. The closer I came to them, the further they moved away. Following them through the clouds is a journey I would make again. Thank you.